And if you strip away the history, the political necessity, and the original context of struggle, you're left with a gorgeous piece of architecture, sure, but the structure is hollowed out. It's just mimicry. It's not. It's not cultural transmission.
But see, that's the thing, isn't it? What if the underlying structural impulse, the need for visible dignity, the rejection of conformity, that assertion of self in a hostile world is universal?
Okay.
If the culture that's adopting it feels a similar systemic pressure, then maybe the origin story becomes secondary to the output. The defiance is functionally identical.
That is a fascinating way to look at it, because we are talking about a visual language born entirely out of resistance on the cracked asphalt of Los Angeles.
Forged in the heat of discrimination,
The
absolutely.
pressure of institutional racism. It's the Chicano identity, codified by the lowrider and the Cholo style, that somehow went from being a cultural shield, a banner, to a globally exported blueprint for opposition.
It's remarkable, really, because it was fundamentally anti-assimilationist. It was meant to draw a clear line in the sand, right here in the American Southwest.
And yet it traveled across the Pacific. It found these, I guess, spiritual homes in places like Japan and Thailand.
Exactly. Communities that just got the inherent power of this visual uniform of defiance.
So that's our mission today. We're going to dig into the tension that exists in that journey. The critical gap between the original politically urgent necessity of Chicano style and how it gets interpreted worldwide as this perfected aesthetic of cool.
Of community and self-determination. And to really get the global thing, you have to start with the foundational concrete.
You have to start with the language itself.
Yeah.
Because the word Chicano is the first layer of resistance. This is an ethnic and political identity rooted in the post-World War II era.
Right. But it really gets its power, its assertive power, during the 60s and 70s, during El Movimiento, the Chicano movement.
And that distinction is so crucial for anyone trying to understand this. It wasn't just like a descriptive label. It was a political stance.
It was a choice.
A very conscious and active choice. It meant you're Mexican-American, born and raised here, but you are actively rejecting the overwhelming pressure to just melt into the Anglo-American mainstream. It was an assertion of brown pride.
And that self-assertion was, very consciously aligned with other movements of the time. You have to think of it alongside the Black is Beautiful movement.
A unified front.
Yeah, a unified front of visibly non-European people just asserting their self-worth against a society that really only valued whiteness. This was a direct reversal of what had been tried before.
And that's where you see the systemic critique just crystallize. Because back in the 30s, some community leaders were actually encouraging people to use the term Mexican-American specifically to stress a perceived white identity.
It was a strategy, an attempt to minimize racism by basically trying to assimilate into the dominant racial category.
And the Chicano youth of the 60s looked at that strategy and just said, no, outright rejected it.
They understood that when the system tries to deny racism by just, reclassifying you as white with a Spanish surname, the only truly revolutionary act is to assert a proud, non-white identity.
You choose visibility over vanishing.
Exactly.
And the power of that choice is just. It's compounded by the fact that the identity they claimed was itself a reclaimed slur.
Precisely. The term Chicano was originally a weapon. It was a classist and racist epithet aimed at low-income Mexicans.
So to reclaim it was a forceful act of self-determination. You're stripping the word of its power to wound you and turning it into a badge of honor.
But to find the original blueprint for the style, you have to trace that thread back even further, to the true architectural founders, the Pachuco and the Pachuca subculture of the 1940s.
The Pachuco established the foundational attitude, that defiance. This subculture was the immediate precursor, the first generation to really inhabit that in-between space.
Their very existence was a political statement.
It was a refusal to be categorized as either fully Mexican, which often meant being dismissed as backward, or fully American, which meant denying their heritage.
And their uniform, the zoot suit, was, it wasn't just clothing. It was an economic and sartorial protest during a time of extreme conformity.
Oh, absolutely. This is during World War II.
Right.
America's all about rationing. Fabric is scarce. The whole country is being told to be efficient, to show restraint.
And the zoot suit was the absolute opposite of that restraint. We are talking wide-legged, high-waisted trousers that just ballooned at the knee.
And then tapered sharply at the ankle, worn with this long, draped, broad-shouldered jacket. It just consumed a massive amount of fabric.
Which was a really conspicuous act of extravagance. It was a middle finger to the national mandate of austerity.
It was luxury as protest. It was an intentional display of wealth, or at least the idea of it, right in the faces of a society that really just wished they would disappear into the war effort.
And they cultivated this whole attitude of studied, cool, measured indifference that drove the white mainstream, especially the servicemen, absolutely crazy.
And this defiance was verbal, too, through their unique language, callo.
Right, a vibrant rhythmic blend of Spanish and English, just full of slang and code switching.
It reinforced that in-between identity. It made them unintelligible to both the Anglo and the Mexican establishment. It was language as a border guard for the culture.
That total dedication to a self-defined identity, the look, the language, the swagger, it quickly spilled over from the body to the vehicle.
And that gives us the moving manifesto of the lowrider. This is where art, community, and political expression find a new, motorized canvas.
In the post-war Chicano communities, cars were a source of pride, sure, but modifying them became a form of nonconformity. Initially, it was pretty crude.
Like literally just chopping springs or dropping heavy bags of sand or cement into the trunk to slam the car closer to the ground.
But the philosophy driving it is what's so interesting. The goal was to cruise the boulevards low and slow. And this is a profound rejection of core American values.
Speed, efficiency, relentless progress.
Exactly. In America, you drive fast because you're always rushing to the next economic opportunity. The lowrider slows everything down. It demands to be seen. The journey is the purpose.
It flips the whole hierarchy.
Yeah.
It turns the vehicle from just a tool to get from A to B into a sophisticated mobile art gallery.
And it forces the dominant culture to slow down and acknowledge the artistry, whether they want to or not.
And the level of that artistry and craftsmanship just escalated so rapidly. We aren't talking about simple paint jobs anymore.
Oh, not at all. We're talking custom paint with intricate hand-painted pinstriping, layers of candy colors that create this immense depth,
Yeah.
and full-scale murals.
And the iconography in those murals, it tells the entire story of the culture. You see religious symbolism everywhere, the Virgin Mary, the Sacred Hearts.
Right. Often right next to images of struggle or community life. And there are frequent references to indigenous heritage, like Aztec or Mayan patterns, which links back to that political assertion of being native to the land.
And we can't overlook the technical sophistication of the hydraulics. That detail you mentioned about how the systems used to make the cars dance or hop were often recycled or adapted from WWII fighter plane parts.
It's a beautiful metaphor.
Isn't it? They took the tools of the state's war machine and they repurposed them for cultural protest and sophisticated kinetic art.
It's cultural jujitsu, taking the instruments of power and turning them into instruments of expressive art. And structurally, the icon is indisputable. The 1964 Chevrolet Impala.
Still the quintessential lowrider, the king of the bouncy castle, they call it. Its frame is just ideal for hydro systems.
But it's important for you to remember that the car is just one component of the whole social structure. The lowrider clubs themselves are the real backbone.
There's so much more than just groups of guys who like cars.
Far more. They function as these critical extended families. They provide support systems. They enforce codes of respect and loyalty.
And they organize really important charitable events. They're active in their communities, running huge toy drives for local kids.
Which completely contradicts the monolithic negative story that you so often get from the media.
And that leads us directly to the moment that this structure of defiance becomes a target. It's a painful but necessary shift to look at how this beautiful cultural expression became grounds for instant systemic criminalization.
Because parallel to the lowrider, the Cholo subculture evolved directly from that Pachuco aesthetic. Cholo and Chola refer to a distinct lifestyle, an aesthetic rooted firmly in working-class identity, primarily in the barrios of LA.
Let's just nail down the visual code here because it is so structured and intentional. You've got the pressed khaki trousers or chinos, often starched and severely creased.
The clean white t-shirt or tank top, and the signature flannel or tartan shirt, usually buttoned only at the very top.
Add to that the slick back hair, dark sunglasses, sometimes a hairnet, and specific tennis shoes.
And this style, which is often meticulously clean and well-maintained,
Right.
it was instantly and ruthlessly equated with gang member by mainstream society and by law enforcement. The irony is just, it's staggering. The commitment to cleanliness and sharp creases, that visual insistence on dignity was perceived as menacing.
It's the architect's nightmare. It's a system that's just designed to label and control. Police would often specifically target youth wearing this structured look. Simply wearing clean white tennis shoes or having a specific haircut could get you labeled as a deviant, regardless of what you were actually doing.
This hypercriminalization becomes an active system of exclusion. I mean, think about the police departments that openly warned parents about homies dolls. You remember those?
Oh yeah, the little collectible figurines.
Yeah, based on cholo culture. Police claimed they promoted gang life. They weren't just targeting people, they were targeting representations of the culture.
And that pattern of criminalizing the aesthetic itself has this deep, violent historical precedent. We have to bring the Zoot Suit riots of 1943 back into focus here.
It sets the template.
It really does. The Zoot Suit riots weren't random. They were a coordinated racist attack. You have these white servicemen already feeling superior because of their wartime status.
And they were intensely provoked by the Pachuco and black youth's cool, measured indifference to the war effort and their expensive, flamboyant clothing.
So these soldiers, seeing this defiance, they engaged in vigilante violence. They would drive into the barrios, drag kids out of movie theaters or off the streets, and literally strip the Zoot Suits off their bodies.
Tearing them apart, burning them in the streets. It was ritualistic. It was an attempt to destroy the symbol of their empowerment.
And here is the enduring structural failure. The police did not arrest the aggressors, the white military men committing violent assault.
No, they arrested the victims, the Chicano youth, on these vague charges like disturbing the peace.
The message was crystal clear. The system criminalized the identity, not the violence directed against it.
And that dynamic is what persists right into the contemporary Cholo subculture. Because this look is so routinely equated with criminality, it becomes a massive barrier to economic opportunity. You will not get that low-level service job if you walk in looking like this.
Which brings us to what I think is a core insight here, the dignity loophole. These young people are often making a radically conditioned choice.
What do you mean by that?
They knowingly adopt a look that they understand blocks them from certain low-level, often exploitative service sector jobs.
So why? Why do it?
Because that intentional opposition, the choice to remain visibly defiant rather than adopt the required uniform of submission, is how they maintain their dignity. They are literally placing themselves out of service to the mainstream economy to preserve their self-respect.
It's a refusal to become a submissive servant in a racialized, hyper-exploited labor market.
Exactly. And if the clothes can be stripped off or criminalized, the resistance has to move on to a permanent canvas, the skin. And this necessity birthed the powerful tradition of Chicano tattooing.
The history here is just rooted in scarcity and hardship. Chicano tattooing emerged from the slums and prisons of LA. Artists were relying on improvised machines.
Like using guitar strings, pen motors, simple sewing needles.
And limited ink, usually just black or diluted black that would come out looking blue. The skin became the ultimate archive of struggle and loyalty.
And the black and gray realism that came out of this environment is now recognized globally as a major art form. It's so narrative. It's not just about cool images. It's about deeply symbolic storytelling. Life, death, faith, hardship.
Let's detail some of that core iconography because it's the visual language of the community. What stands out immediately are the payasos, the stylized female clowns.
Right. They represent that essential duality of life.
They symbolize that balance, the laughter, the happiness, the party right next to the tears, the pain, the struggle. It's this deep acknowledgement that life is a complex stage where comedy and tragedy are constantly playing out. You have to accept both.
Then you have the pervasive religious imagery. The Virgin Mary, Sacred Hearts bleeding, praying hands.
Often detailed with intricate halos or scrolls. And this isn't just generic faith. It's a commitment to a spiritual devotion that's often deepened by the lack of institutional support or the constant threat of danger in your environment.
And tying it all back to the political root of the identity, you find icons of cultural and political struggle, images of Cesar Chavez, themes from the Mexican Revolution, ancient indigenous patterns.
It all asserts that this identity is historic, deep-rooted, and actively resistant.
And the sophistication of the art itself just speaks volumes. It's moved so dramatically from those crude, improvised designs to high-level photorealistic artistry. I mean, you have pioneers like Freddie Negrete, who brought this aesthetic out of the prison system.
And Mr. Cartoon. His fine-line black and gray style defined a generation and now influences mainstream culture globally.
They didn't just popularize it, they elevated it. They showed that the stories born of the street, Stories of hardship and loyalty could be translated into fine art that demanded respect on a global stage.
And once a culture reaches that level of sophistication and visual power, it naturally becomes exportable, which is where we shift to the Trans-Pacific echo. And it's an almost unbelievable paradox that this hyperlocal California barrio culture found one of its most dedicated homes thousands of miles away in Japan.
It started in the 80s, right? The culture started bleeding out of its Hispanic roots through American media, movies like American Graffiti,
Which wasn't strictly Chicano, but it captured the spirit of car culture and cruising.
and films like Cheech and Chong gave these glimpses into the style and aesthetic that just captivated Japanese youth.
Japan's response wasn't casual, though. It was obsessive. The timeline is important. Junichi Shimodera, who becomes this huge figure in the Japanese lowrider scene, he saw a photo of a lowrider in 1981. He spent years just researching it until he finally flew to LA in 1987 to see the culture firsthand.
And he brought that dedication home with him. He founded Paradise Road and the Pharaoh's Car Club, which is now Japan's oldest.
And here's the critical distinction. Junichi stressed that for the Japanese scene, it had to be the entire package, the cars, the music, the clothing, and crucially, the people and the culture. They adopted the philosophy of community and respect.
This is where my mind finds synergy with the Japanese mindset. Their success and the stunning quality of their builds is so often linked to that national trait of otaku.
Otaku, that intensive, almost religious dedication, focusing all your time and effort into a single specialized passion.
So when you apply that level of meticulous, neurotically detailed focus to the craft of lowriding, the results are just astounding.
You get cars that are not just copies, but in some ways they're over-perfected versions of the originals. I mean, you look at Genbu, the owner of that incredible 1965 Buick Riviera, he poured over $100,000 into the car.
100,000.
And the custom hand-painted artwork and engraving took the craftsman 5 full months. Just extreme precision on every single layer of paint, every minute detail.
That level of technical excellence created this ironic loop across the Pacific.
Yeah.
Now, American lowrider enthusiasts are looking back at the Japanese craftsmanship and recognizing it as the highest tier of the art form.
It's the ultimate validation, isn't it? Taking your creation, understanding its integrity, and then elevating the execution.
But I have to ask, why did this particular blueprint resonate so deeply with Japanese youth? It's not just about aesthetics. It has to be about channeling youthful unrest.
And that connection is fascinating. Many of the key figures who embraced low riding, like Masa Watanabe and Junichi himself, were part of the Buchizoku culture.
The motorcycle and car gangs that formed in post-WWII Japan.
Exactly. Expressing their frustration and anti-establishment feelings through reckless driving, chaos, and societal disruption.
So lowriding wasn't just a style swap. It was a substitution of one structural form of rebellion for another. They moved from chaos and antisocial behavior to a highly structured, community-based, and artistic discipline.
It offered a nonviolent, constructive, yet still powerfully defiant outlet for that exact same anti-establishment energy.
It gave them a disciplinary structure, the emphasis on loyalty, community, the painstaking time investment of the craft. It channeled their former chaotic energy into something positive and demanding of respect.
Right. And Masa Watanabe noted that while the LA scene had its gray areas with gangs, the Japanese clubs almost universally enforced strict rules against interclub rivalry and violence. They were, in a way, purifying the culture's positive values.
And this commitment isn't just internal. It's maintained through active cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Japanese clubs are constantly talking with their LA counterparts, importing parts, sharing ideas.
Reinforcing the philosophy that this is a respectful, ongoing dialogue, not just cultural tourism.
So if Japan represents the high craft, dedicated appreciation, then Thailand gives us a glimpse into a different kind of resilient adaptation. The rise of the Taino subculture in Bangkok.
Here, the style really took hold with working-class men and women. They were primarily drawn to the visible elements. The loose-fitting style is practical for Thailand's intense heat.
And the similar skin tones make adopting the look feel organic and accessible.
But the motive for adoption is purely narrative. It's sociological. Thai enthusiasts are just captivated by the story of the cholos.
The story of people who grew up poor from disadvantaged places and rose to command respect and power within their community.
It's the universal narrative of rising from hardship. They see that visual language and interpret it as empowering, a badge of self-determination against forces that would otherwise render them invisible.
And this cultural borrowing then becomes a weapon for local social critique. Despite the U.S. media linking the Cholo style with violence, the Thai groups consciously reject the criminal aspects. They often have explicit rules against hard drug use.
Instead, they harness the aggressiveness of the culture, that attitude of commanding attention, of confronting authority, to critique their own domestic issues.
You can see this directly in their art. In Thai hip-hop groups writing these powerful raps like FK the Popo, which is a rare and daring critique of systemic police corruption in Thai society.
It proves that the visual language of a systemically oppressed group on one continent can be flawlessly adapted as armor for self-respect and defiance on another. The core message of claiming dignity is universal.
So the architecture of Chicano style is now global, but as we widen the lens, we see that the culture itself is so much more than the car and the clothing. It's an entire artistic and political ecosystem that defines that critical in-between space.
It absolutely is. This culture has birthed or heavily influenced major art forms. Chicano literature, like Jose Antonio Villarreal's seminal novel Pocho, muralism, theater, music.
Spanning from Chicano rap all the way to niche movements like Chola Goth.
And central to its political philosophy is that rejection of borders, the concept of sin fronteras. The Chicano identity celebrates hybridity and actively challenges the categories of immigrant or foreigner.
By claiming deep indigenous roots in the U.S. Southwest.
They remap history. They assert that they aren't foreign newcomers, but native people to the land now known as the West and Southwest United States. They draw on the mythos of Aztlan, the ancestral homeland of the Aztec people.
And that assertion that they are not immigrant but colonized is the spiritual and political backbone of the entire aesthetic movement.
But for a culture so unified and defiant against external systems of oppression, it has historically struggled with some brutal internal fights against machismo and heteronormativity. The architecture of defiance didn't automatically build a structure of internal equity.
And that internal struggle for full inclusion is such an essential layer of the narrative. Even the Pachuca, the female counterpart to the Pachuco, was often denied the same status and respect.
She was frequently marginalized. Her style, her independence, was often interpreted as a symbol of dissident femininity, and in some cases, a veiled reference to lesbian sexuality.
Which highlights the paradox, right? The movement is fighting for visibility externally, but it resists visibility internally when it challenges traditional patriarchal norms. And we see contemporary artists still fighting that exact battle within the culture today.
Take the work of Manuel Paul, a queer Chicano artist. His mural, Por Vida, was this powerful image depicting queer and trans Chicanos in a lowrider context. It was a clear, visible assertion of identity.
An intentional structural disruption. It directly challenged the deeply ingrained traditional exclusivity of heterosexuality in lowrider culture.
And what was the immediate result?
Vandalism, online threats, community pushback.
It's painful evidence. It shows that the fight for survival against external racism often allows internal conservatism to flourish. The pressure to present a unified, hyper-masculine front to the outside world makes it incredibly difficult for queer or non-conforming voices to gain purchase within the community itself.
And this struggle extends to gender norms generally. I mean, think about the feminist and queer critique offered by artists like Xandra Ibarra. Her video art, Spectacle 2 like Tortillera, was explicitly designed to challenge normative, hyper-traditional ideals of Mexican womanhood that are often enforced within the culture.
And that art, even though it was hosted in exhibitions specifically curated to highlight Womex-Nance queer and trans artists, it still faced censorship from certain arts departments and institutions.
Sometimes fueled by traditional conservative elements within the broader community. The art was seen as too provocative, too raw, too challenging of the established internal hierarchy.
The lesson here is that cultural identity is never static. It's an ongoing, contested space. Chicano style isn't a finished product. It's a living blueprint that has to constantly expand, correct itself, and fight to make space for those who were previously excluded by its own machismo.
Right. And the ability of the art to also function as spiritual healing is often overlooked. Helping men, in particular, process intergenerational trauma by reconnecting with indigenous worldviews, even as they struggle with their own internal biases. It's a culture that's constantly redefining its own heart.
So we've traced this extraordinary architecture of defiance, from the conspicuous consumption of the zoot suits, through the meticulous black and gray narratives permanently inked onto skin, to the slow, cruising rhythm of the impalas in California.
And we've watched that cultural blueprint translate to the otaku perfectionists in Nagoya and the anti-corruption social critics on the streets of Bangkok.
The fact that the visual language forged under systemic oppression in Los Angeles could become a universal symbol for self-respect, community, and resistance thousands of miles away it's arguably one of the most powerful forms of knowledge exchange.
It requires understanding someone else's fundamental struggle so deeply that you can effectively adopt its framework for your own.
It makes me wonder, though, about the end game. If the goal of the original Pachuco was absolute nonconformity, intentional opposition, a refusal to be commercialized or assimilated, what happens when their carefully crafted radical aesthetic becomes the sought-after blueprint for global conformity?
When everyone, everywhere, wants to look cool and rebellious in a flannel shirt and creased khakis.
Is that global popularity the ultimate triumph of a culture that demanded to be seen? Or is it just the next most subtle form of cultural assimilation into a globalized, commodified aesthetic that extracts the visual without paying homage to the pain that created it?
A question that lingers long after the car has stopped bouncing. Next time, we'll be diving into a completely different kind of architecture, the invisible structures of control, and how living under constant digital surveillance is quietly reshaping human behavior and, more importantly, human trust.
We'll examine the true psychological cost of the panopticon when it shrinks down to fit in the pocket of every single person on Earth.
This episode is powered by Neon Core Media for stories they said were too real to tell.